Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. It's your girl Lori, and this is day 3 of my Ireland tour and our last day in Dublin. Not day and night in Dublin, because the next day, wait, I want to make sure that I'm saying that right, because we were there Friday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I feel like there might have been another day in there, but I'll think about it here in a second. And so this is what we did when we went to Belfast. Now, let me give you a little bit of Belfast history. And my lovely Ireland, beautiful humans that I know do watch this and listen to me, correct me if I'm wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to be giving out false information. But I think I have it pretty much good. So there were various excursions that you could do. Some did a sip and see. We decided we were going to go to Belfast and go to the Titanic Museum. Yep, the Titanic, you know, like Rose, the Titanic Museum. White Star, I believe, right? And so again, everything is long in travel. Like, you know, Belfast and from Dublin on a coach, like I said, it's a lot, I'm sure, faster if you're driving, like by yourself, but in a coach, it's a little bit bigger. Although I'll tell you, they can whip those coaches around. It was about 2 hours up, 2 hours and 20 minutes or so up, because here's the fun fact about Belfast. So they said, we're going to go into the UK. Belfast is in Ireland, but it's essentially the UK. And I'm like, we're like, do we need our passports? They're like, no, you don't need your passports, but we are going to go through this thing. And when I got there to get a coffee, they use pounds there. So Belfast is still part of the UK, where the Republic of Ireland is not. Right? So it's still all the same thing, but you're actually part of the UK if you're in Belfast. Now, Belfast is also a known location, shooting location for Game of Thrones, both the older Game of Thrones and the newer prequel of Game of Thrones. So right where the Titanic Museum is, you can see when they weren't on location, you can see the buildings, which for some odd reason I took like a million pictures of, because I love Game of Thrones. But they film right there. Like, that's exactly where they film, and that's where they're going to be filming again for when they're not on location, the prequels too. Oh, and I forgot to say, on the way to Wicklow, they were filming the Vikings. So if you watch the Vikings, that's filmed in more of the Wicklow area. But there's a lot of things filmed in Ireland, right? And this is one of them, is Game of Thrones. And it's a huge shooting location for them. So when you go up there, you're going to go through this little like drawbridge thing. I don't think you need your passport there, because we didn't need our passport there. But now you're technically still back into the UK, but you never left the island. So when you get to the Titanic Museum, it's beautiful. And if you ever watched the movie Belfast, if you haven't watched it, if you have, in the very beginning, that's exactly where we were, where the big yellow cranes are. That's symbolic, because that's like where they like built the big Titanic, right? That's where they built White Star. And, but the building, the Titanic Museum, is made out of aluminum, or as they say, aluminium. It was so funny because, you know, we're in a different country for us. And so, you know how sometimes you find, people say, how do you pronounce this? And my friend Ethan said, oh, it's aluminum. It's like, no, close, but it's aluminium. It's probably the correct way of saying it anyway. But it's beautiful. And when you walk in, I could have spent even longer there, right? Because there's like shopping in the areas and things like that. But I'm going to talk to you about Belfast in a minute, because it's not all fun and games there. And it wasn't. It was very traumatic and very heavy. But the Titanic Museum itself is it's beautiful. It's several floors. It's very knowledgeable. You can see some of the older artifacts. You stand on this like glass thing. Well, you can look down on it too, but you can stand on this glass thing and you can see actual footage from when they found the Titanic sunken, right? And it kind of goes by you. It was really spectacular. And you can see the last messages. You can hear the last messages. You see things. If you like history, it's an amazing thing. I literally could have stayed longer. And then we went over to the Titanic Hotel, where we ate an amazing lunch. Again, 2-hour lunch, because remember, that's how we roll. But this is the original drawing room, the drafting room. Like, it's the original drafting room. And I'm like, that's kind of spectacular. And it was amazing. I mean, so it is something I would say worth visiting if you're a Game of Thrones fan. Again, you're not going to go tour it's just the building, but just knowing that it's there's something there. Okay, prior to getting there, we learned a little bit more history on Belfast. And so the Protestants and the Catholics battled a lot there up until just 21 years ago, where they signed it, like the peace agreement. How do I know that? Is because they told us, forgot, but I have some people who follow on my Instagram that live there in Belfast. Like I literally was shooting a story and somebody said, I'm in Belfast watching it. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? Like it was spectacular. So Belfast back in the day, and I'm going to show you some murals that were up here. And they put these murals there and they kind of gave us this warning. It was like, hey, listen, they put these murals here to kind of try to keep, like to warn people, right? The murals are still there. And it was so much unrest, right? Because you know how in general, the world in general carries a lot of hate with it, which I don't like. So I can only control myself, right? But I don't like the fact that people hate people for no reason or because they believe something differently. So this was a problem. And if, again, you should go watch the movie Belfast. And you'll understand more about it. It was very not great. And it's Protestants versus Catholics and just a really heavy space. So we went to the wall. There's like these peace walls that would like help protect, right? And we went to the same peace wall that Nelson Mandela went to. Lots of writing. I got to sign my name. They let us out of the bus. And we got to go to the peace wall and you could sign the peace wall if you chose to. I absolutely did with my little pen. I didn't have a marker, a little tiny pen. It wasn't even mine. I borrowed it. And you're not going to really get the full depth of how big it is. But since that agreement about 21 years ago, it has gotten better, but there's still a lot of unrest there. And you could totally see it. You could feel the energy. It's not awful, but we were there. So July 12th. Is this time where to commemorate, okay, not everybody does this, but to commemorate that, it's like symbolic. It's like our 4th of July. A little different, but it's like our 4th of July. So they put all of these like pallets and things and they stack them super high, like 200 feet high, like high. They paint them and then they set them on fire. So that's what they were doing when we were there. You'll never see a bonfire like that. We didn't see the fire part of it, but the stackings and everything and the painting, and it was just mesmerizing. But you can definitely feel the unrest. So if you want to know a lot more about it and get into the Belfast history, and you can see it. And it's interesting too, because even like kind of like here, if you're up north, you have a different accent. Down south, you have a different accent. Similar, because you could hear the difference. The houses there looked like, you can see it's just different. But Belfast it's a beautiful place to visit, and I would encourage you to visit it, right? It wasn't always that way, but it absolutely is now. And they could definitely, for sure, use the tourist income and stuff like that. It's definitely on the come up. I think the Titanic Museum being there is helpful. Lots of things. Eating lunch over in the drafting room was amazing. There's shopping. We did not get an opportunity to do that because we had something else that we had to do later on that evening. So we had to skip out on that part of it because lunch was like 84 hours, but food's really good there. Definitely something that I would recommend visiting. Again, it's going to be heavier. Okay. It's not, I don't want to just take like, you guys know this about me. I want to know how people live. I don't want to just do the fancy things. We did do the fancy things, but I want to go to up into the villages and in different places to kind of see. And so having friends, having people who follow me, who live in Belfast, who aren't there on a tourist, they actually live there, to give me the information that they did was quite helpful. And it's something that I want to hear, because I think very often when people visit here in the States or they visit different countries, you always look at it from the fun part that you're visiting, but you don't realize that there's stuff that goes on behind the scenes and like how people really live. Like, this trip I took really wasn't like a real life trip, right? It was like a trip of a lifetime, that an all expenses paid trip. I feel like I was on Price is Right and won a trip. But they did allow us to do a lot of history stuff and gave us a lot of history, which was so helpful. They talked a little bit about the license plates on the way up, which was beneficial to me. Like, if you see the British license plates, the ones that go straight across, and they were saying how, like, let's say you see like 201 and then there's a dash. So that means the first part of 2020 is when that person got those plates. And then if there's a L, like, it's really weird too. Like, they don't get their license in Dublin, I know, until 18. And then you have to have that for 2 years. And then you're like a newbie for another 2 years, unless you get your license in a lottery. Like sometimes they would have a lottery. So it's like, oh, okay, you can have your license. You're like, oh, that explains a lot of the reasons why some people can't drive, but they drove actually quite well. But if you get an opportunity to visit Belfast, I highly encourage it. And you can totally do it if you go into Dublin. It's important that you understand what goes on, because we get so caught up in our lives here and in your own personal life and how whatever country you're from, you get caught up in your own mix. But you have to realize that there's so many other things that people are dealing with. And they're a lot, they're trying to get that unity, and they're a lot better than they were 21 years ago. So I'd encourage you to watch the movie. I'd encourage you to visit Belfast. Absolutely spend more than spend at least a day there. You could easily spend more than that there, because there's so much more to see on the countryside. So definitely go to the Peace Wall if you can. It's just amazing to see. Wish your love and well and put it on the wall. So that was the trip to Belfast and back to Dublin.